Rather unexpectedly, we've just got a huge info dump from New World and Amazon Game Studios. Now this actually happened in a Forged in Eternum Q&A that they've just released, and they addressed some of the feedback that they got from the previous dev update. And oh my god, there is some juicy stuff in here. Before we talk about it though, if you want to help me grow the channel, becoming a YouTube member is truly the best way. So one of the first questions that they get asked is regarding the lack of PvP content on the roadmap, and they say that there is some PvP content coming. They specifically talk about the influence change that is going to be happening, but if I'm honest, we sort of already knew that was the case. It sounds like they're aiming for spring and it's just not made it to the roadmap, but I think that would have helped people feel a little bit better. For me, there's still not that much PvP content even if you include that. Cross Realm Outpost Rush is just Outpost Rush that we've all been doing anyway, but what kind of answer can they give if they're not going to give us more PvP? We'll see how good that is when it gets delivered. There was also some big news regarding mounts. It sounds like we're going to get some kind of trade skill that goes along with it, so maybe some kind of taming or animal husbandry, which will be a huge addition to the game, and they say obviously that's going to be a big addition, so it's something they need to work on in the long term. It's not something they can do quickly. Moving on, they then talk about weapons. Everybody was excited about the idea of daggers. Well, daggers are not coming next. Daggers are still probably going to come at some point, but the actual next weapon sounds like it's going to be a focus-based healing buffing kind of weapon. Maybe like that Angry Earth staff that we heard about in the past. But yeah, it sounds like a focused weapon is coming next, not daggers. No ETA on that, apart from maybe probably past summer, I would guess, because of the roadmap. Then they asked about transmog and dyeing skins, and they said, yes, you will be able to dye skins. I'm presuming that means store-bought skins, as well as the ones that you can transmog. Hopefully that's the case, otherwise, you know, it doesn't really fully answer the question if it's not. But very interesting information there as well. And then another big one, like there's quite a few like big changes that they just sort of subtly mention are going to get changed. It sounds like we're not going to have 10 mutated levels. It sounds like we're going to go to a much smaller number than 10. The question suggests 4, and then Dave just goes, yeah, I agree, there's too many, which sort of makes sense because they're in sort of like brackets between how many mutations you get. They look to want to simplify that, and I think that's a good change. Maybe it'll stop spreading people out a little bit and they'll actually focus people to get the mutations done. That would be a really positive change, and not one that I'd even necessarily thought of, but I'm happy to hear about it. And then a little bit of a sad one, which I sort of anticipated but not quite fully because I didn't understand the proper context. They removed the leaderboards from the PTR, and they were like, oh, we're going to temporarily remove these. Well, it sounds like they're actually just not coming in this patch. It sounds like leaderboards, they actually mentioned February, but basically it's going to be coming before the next spring big content update. So leaderboards have pretty much officially been delayed again, basically. And that makes sense because in their current iteration, they're a little bit weak in my opinion. And then one that everybody's probably going to be happy about. I am wrong. It does not sound like the announcement of an expansion is coming at the Game Awards, therefore I will not be streaming it. Unless they're baiting and switching me. Scott said you can anticipate hearing more about what's coming at the end of next year in about 6 months' time. Now that does align with the Game Awards, so my bet about donating £100 to charity is still going to be iffy. So it could be possible that it is still going to be an expansion at the end of next year, or it might not be, and we'll get onto why in a moment. But effectively, there's not going to be an announcement at the Game Awards. I think that's them saying no. Somebody asked about these seasonal events affecting content, and they basically said that the seasonal team's a team that's not really like impacted doing anything else, so it's not really affecting the rate of content. So don't be sad when you see seasonal events. It's not really hurting the game in any other way. Another thing that we did know, but they've fully confirmed it here again, is that the dev updates are not going to be monthly. They heard the feedback that it was effectively them telling us stuff we already knew, and they want to change that to actually be the reveals. That's a really positive change. I'm really happy about that. For the little smaller like Q&As and the little updates about lore and stuff like that, that's why we get the Forged in Eternum, and that's obviously going to be a little bit more chill. Dropping this Q&A for me was like massive, absolute like game changer in my eyes. And then a big one going back to PvP, they are not currently planning a different PvP map other than Outpost Rush. Now I know you're going to be a little bit disappointed there, but in my eyes, it sort of makes sense. The main argument is the one that we sort of have already said a few times, in that it would split the audience, right? If you had it so that it was 2 queues, then people would have to pick which queue. And if you have it so that it's 1 queue, then it's not really the same game and you're not going to get the one that you want. So they were a little bit worried about splitting the audience in that one. And I think that makes perfect sense, right? Which leads me on to think that once they actually do get cross-realm, we then might get more PvP modes. Because then it would make sense. Your player base is a lot bigger because you're taking the entire pool of the player base. Well, at least in your region. They did say that likely with the cross-realm PvP Outpost Rush stuff, that they would probably make some changes to Outpost Rush, and you know, that's probably positive. I know a lot of people are getting a little bit fed up of it, so it would be nice to see some tweaks going to that area of the game. And then going back to the expansion a little bit, they spoke about, or Scott said, they're pretty much going to do one big content drop every year, so something like a Brimstone. And they said they are planning on that in something in 2023. Now what that is, we don't know. Is it going to be just another new zone? I say just another new zone like it's dead easy. Or is it going to be something more substantial like an expansion? Either way, it doesn't sound like we're going to get that revealed to us until summer next year. But we can expect some kind of big drop at the end of next year, and that makes everybody feel a little bit better that something is coming. They're just not confident enough with showing what it is. Like, signs still point to me that an expansion would maybe get announced in summer, but it might not be that. It might be that just going to do some kind of like big content drop at the end of 2023, and an expansion will come at some point in 2024. I don't really know. It's hard for me to say. We'll have to wait and see. That's 6 months away, and I absolutely cannot wait. I really like the fact that they did this, sort of immediately addressing some of the points that the community had. Some of the answers are a little bit underwhelming, like the lack of PvP content, but ultimately that's some really interesting info. A trade skill when it comes to mounts, that sounds fascinating. A new focus weapon is the one that's next. You're going to be able to dye skins. The mutation number's probably going to get dropped from 10 to a much lower number. Leaderboard's officially delayed. That one's not that great, but let's throw it in. And the fact that there's going to be like tweaks to Outpost Rush. Yeah, I think there's a lot of like positive things that they said in this conversation. I'm really happy that they did it. Let me know your thoughts about it. If you want to support the channel, then becoming a YouTube member is really the best way. It really does help me grow the channel and sets me up for the future. Other than that though, you should definitely have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.